Tonight on the Late Debate, slim pickings from the Chancellor. London failed to get all it wanted in the spending review, so whatever happened to a Labour mayor seeing eye to eye with a Labour government?
If we do well, the country benefits. It's not us versus them, and that's why I'm frustrated and, as I said, angry.
Also tonight, as the cost of driving electric gets more expensive, businesses worry about picking up the bill.
What is the point of putting us in such a difficult position that there is real risk that a 30-year-old business does not survive?
Excuse me, gents.
Hello.
You're on camera, mate. You're bang to right.
And will the battle ever be won against London's fare dodgers? Hello and welcome to the Late Debate. We know money's tight, but London's really feeling the pinch after the Chancellor carved up the cash in her comprehensive spending review. Sadiq Khan wanted more money for police, housing and transport and hoped a Labour mayor working with a Labour government would help. But it wasn't quite the political partnership he wanted. He was feeling a bit shortchanged.
I think the Chancellor got it wrong in not supporting new investment in infrastructure in London. And my disappointment is because these pieces of investment, these infrastructure, wouldn't just lead to more jobs being created, they would lead to more homes being built that we desperately need. And my anxiety is this is a continuation of a pitting London against the rest of the country.
Joining me now to discuss that are my guests this week. From Labour, the MP for Hendon, David Pinto-Dushinsky. From the Conservatives, the MP for Harrow East, Bob Blackman. And for the Liberal Democrats, the MP for Richmond Park, Sarah Olney. Welcome all of you. David, is the Mayor right? London's been shortchanged?
I actually think it's been a really good spending review for London. It's not just the huge investment in the NHS. The fact is we've had the biggest settlement for TfL in a decade with more than 2.2 billion for investment in projects like new trains on the Piccadilly and Jubilee lines. There's been the biggest investment in 50 years across the country in social housing, and we're going to see that coming on top of half a billion more for London social housing. We've seen 10,000 London children lifted out of poverty through the extension of free school meals. We've seen a real terms increase for the Met. I could go on and on. And the contrast between that and the mess that the Conservatives led and the decade-plus long squeeze on London finances is really clear. I think it's making a really difference.
Was the Mayor right or wrong?
So look, I think this is hugely overblown. Obviously, Sadiq's making the case.
He said today he was angry and frustrated. Look, that's quite off message.
Look, Sadiq's making the case for London in his own way, exactly as mayors like Andy Burnham and Tracy Brabin do. But I'm really clear, this will make a real difference for Londoners, this SR.
Sarah, you're really disappointed about Hammersmith Bridge. No money there.
I am very disappointed about Hammersmith Bridge. We're still waiting to hear. There's been obviously various different bits of infrastructure spending being announced over the last few weeks, and I really want to hear whether some of that might finally involve Hammersmith Bridge. But my real disappointment about the spending review is how little money the police are getting. That's one of the main priorities of my constituents in Richmond Park. And we know, we've heard Sir Mark Rowley calling for that funding. He's saying how important it is for the Met that they get the funding that they need in order to be able to deliver the level of policing that London deserves. And there's no doubt, and he was very clear about it, it's nowhere near enough.
Is policing the biggest issue for your constituents?
Very much so. The fear of crime and actually the huge increase in knife crime now is, I think, really concerning for people. We're getting literally people being attacked literally every day now in Harrow, and we are the second safest borough in London. So this is a really serious problem. We've only got a 2.3% increase for the Met. That's below the rate of inflation. It's below the level of the pay settlement, which means that the police are already saying they can't deal with all the crimes that are being committed. And I'm afraid that this demonstrates that we're not getting the money in London that we desperately need. But when we talk about TfL, for example, here, there's been a settlement that's welcome for 4 years, but it's only 2.2 billion. Remember, under the last Conservative government, TfL were given 6 billion to compensate for the loss of fair income due to the pandemic. So we're not getting the investment. We need the Bakerloo line. We need the Docklands like railway extended, Bakerloo line extensions, and other
So you're
extensions.
certainly on the same page as Sadiq Khan there.
Well, I mean, the reality is what we want to do is to get people onto public transport with new infrastructure projects. What this settlement has done is to enable the things like the Piccadilly line, which is welcome to be done. But these are the, if you like, the low priority items for TfL to just keep the network running. We're not talking about improving the network, it's just keeping the
Just
existing
coming
going.
back to crime, David, has London really lost out here?
Well, and I really need to come back on what Bob says, because we've seen not just a 2.3% real increase. We also saw 7% extra for the Met last year. We've also seen a 94% increase in the levels that City Hall's putting in, and a £65 million capital city grant. That means since Labour came to power, there's been an extra £255 million for the Met. And I think
Met
it's
still has a £260 million black hole, and 1,700 police officers and PCSO jobs are at risk.
Sorry, but I'd have to say it's a bit rich for Bob to raise that when under the Conservatives, between 2010 and 2014, the Met's budget was cut by over £1 billion, and we didn't hear Conservative MPs raising a peep about it
Bob,
then. What we're actually doing is filling the black hole they have left.
With the state of public finances, would a Conservative mayor would have got any better money or more money from a Conservative government?
Well, the Conservative mayor would obviously put the police as the most important issue to assist London and actually concentrate the money there. And we've got a mayor, by the way, and we haven't talked about housing yet, we've got a mayor that returned money to the Conservative government because he didn't spend it on the social and affordable housing that we desperately need in London. I mean, his priorities are wrong. He's failed on every single one of his objectives since he was first elected. And the sad reality is we were told, as you quite rightly said at the beginning of the programme, that all we needed was a Labour government, a Labour mayor working hand in hand, and everything would be rosy.
I wondered how long it would take you
Well,
to remind
it would be
David of
rosy,
that.
wouldn't it? Well, what we're finding is actually that this government is transferring the money from outside, from London, and the London taxpayers are the ones that generate the wealth, and that's going elsewhere in the country.
Sarah, Rachel Reeves even suggested that London has had it too good for too long. Doesn't London just have to suck it up this time?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Bob makes a good point. We urgently need housing in the capital, and some of those infrastructure projects, like the DLR extension, could have really unlocked lots of access to places where there's capacity to build lots of housing. But let's not forget, London's child poverty rate is 35% compared to a UK average of 29%. So we have our problems here in London as well. We also are the economic powerhouse of the UK. And of course, we want to see other regions enjoy some of the benefits that London has. But there is no point trying to achieve that by undermining London and failing to invest in its future.
David, can I just point out that even forget the DLR extension and the police funding, but London Council say they're £500 million short of what they need to run services.
And so, look, when you step back, as I say, this has been a fantastic SR for the country and for London. And what I would say is that, again, it's very difficult to hear from Bob and Sarah, genuine though I'm sure they are, when we've seen an SR that's put more than 190 billion across the period into public services, 113 billion into infrastructure that London will benefit from, and both of their parties have opposed it. They've talked about the fact they want more money. They can't explain how they'd raise it. They need to decide whether they actually support the investment or whether, as in the case of the Conservatives, they don't, in which case, what would they cut?
Bob, briefly, what do you think Sadiq Khan's done to upset his Labour masters?
Well, clearly he's off message. I mean, clearly the view is that from the government that actually London has had more than its fair share, which is not true. And I think the other issue that David makes a fair point, what we wouldn't be doing is driving millionaires to leave London who pay the highest level of tax to pay the tax that we can then reinvest in public services.
OK, let's leave spending for a moment, because while we're all encouraged to go green and drive electric, some might argue it's easier said than done. Worries about charging points and the prospect of having to pay the congestion charge might be enough to put some drivers off. And it's got businesses worried too. In a West London showroom, the newest models from China are strategically placed to catch the eye of drivers on the A4. A Moda and JQ cars can be petrol, electric or hybrid. But despite the drive towards zero-emission vehicles, purely electric cars powered by a battery account for fewer than 1 in 5 sales. Increasingly, Londoners are turning to plug-in hybrids.
A lot of people are living in apartments or living in terraced houses without off-street parking. It's not safe or legal to run a charging cable across the pavement or hang one down out of the window. So having the plug-in hybrid means that you're not entirely dependent on the battery.
In some London boroughs, drivers of battery-powered cars enjoy cheaper parking. But Transport for London wants to end the 100% discount, which allows electric vehicles to avoid the congestion charge. Anoma runs a flower shop on the edge of Covent Garden. She's bought an electric van and an electric car for her deliveries. The congestion charge will add almost £7,000 a year to her running costs, and she's not happy with the mayor.
This is going to make him extremely unpopular. For a small business, it's not creating an enabling environment, and that's the role of government.
Transport for London says it needs to alter the congestion charge, otherwise another 2,200 cars a day will be on the streets. But the loss of the incentive is just one consideration for drivers looking to make the switch to an electric vehicle. Another is so-called range anxiety. Will their car run out of juice before they can find a charging point? Westminster has more than any other borough.
We have over 2,700 now in Westminster, most of which are next to resident parking bays. Some of them have dedicated parking bays such that only electric vehicles can park in them. And we actually predict now that every resident with an electric vehicle in Westminster is within a 5-minute walk of a charge point.
Helpfully for Anoma, there's a charging point in a lamppost outside her shop. Unhelpfully for her, it's in a residence parking bay, so she risks a fine every time the van's topped up. So, do any of you have electric cars? No? Are you still with internal combustion engines, all of you?
I've got a hybrid.
So what's holding Londoners back? What's holding you all back?
Well, first thing is electric cars are expensive to buy. And indeed, if you've got a driveway or somewhere where you've got a secure place to charge your car, perfectly okay. Equally, you're encouraged, because of the removal of the congestion charge on electric vehicles, you can drive in and out free of charge. Now it's proposed that because the mayor's after more money, basically, he's going to remove that 100% exemption. So I think it's a real challenge. Plus, as is said, that if you're in a terraced house or don't have a driveway, then you're dependent on the electric lampposts, etc., charging points, and councils across London have not installed enough. It's as simple as that.
David, I was asking you shortly ago to defend the government against the mayor. I'm now asking you to defend the mayor. Is he right to remove that incentive?
Well, I think there's two things here. Firstly, on the kind of broader question of EVs, electric vehicles, I think both this government and the last one encouraged people to buy them. But there was a bit of a policy hokey-cokey. The last government changed policy hugely. So firstly, they brought in a plug-in cars grant, then they got rid of it. Then they brought in the 2030 target, then they changed it. They didn't put enough money into charging points. So I think that's not helped. That's fed uncertainty. And I think what we've seen again with the SR was that with 1.4 billion for the take-up of EVs, for 400 million nationally for charging infrastructure, we've seen government really rowing in behind to support. And I think we've seen that in London too. So we now have almost 23,000 charge points. 1 in 3 charge points in all of Britain is in London. On the issue of the congestion charge, I think TfL is trying to strike a difficult balance here. On the one hand, it wants to support electric vehicles. On the other hand, it's got to manage congestion. We currently have a congestion challenge in London that costs us £4 billion a year. That's almost £1,000 per car. And since the discount was brought in, the number of electric vehicles has gone up 6-fold and now make up 20% of the cars actually driving in the zone. So to manage congestion, what TfL's trying to do, I think, is keep the discount, so to recognise the importance of EVs, but reduce it to try to balance out that congestion.
So I imagine people in your constituency, there are more of them with drives to charge their cars than there are in inner London boroughs. But this is all about net zero. Are you confident in the government's net zero targets?
Well, I mean, Liberal Democrats absolutely support them. We want to see greater take-up of electric vehicles. But you touch on an interesting point there, because some of my constituents have driveways and can plug in and charge their cars at home. But many people, particularly people living in blocks of flats, say, have to rely on on-street chargers. And of course, there's a difference in how much they pay, because there's VAT on charged on electricity from an on-street charger, but you don't pay VAT on electricity from your domestic supply. So that's something the Liberal Democrats really want to see the government address, because there's a massive inequality there. Because you'll see, shall we say, wealthier people with driveways able to charge their cars at a much lower rate than people potentially from lower income households living in flats are going to end up paying more for their electricity. So that, I think, is a really, really urgent priority that the government should address. But more broadly, what we want to see is, you know, a much bigger range of options available to people. I don't have an electric car. I do have an electric bike, which, because I can cycle further than I used to be able to and go up more hills, I leave the car at home more often. And, you know, to David's point
they do
about...
flatten the hills, don't they?
They do. They're brilliant for hills.
But you, Bob, as a plug-in hybrid man...
Well, no, it's not a plug-in. It's a mild hybrid. But I think the other thing that is mentioned, of course, in this consultation document now, is once again further work on pay per mile, which, of course, the Mayor said, well, we're not going to do that.
Not the Conservatives in favour of it now.
No, we're not in favour of it. That's the point. The Mayor said there will be no proposals. He's now coming again with a consultation, which, of course, he ruled out in the first place. And we've got to be careful about this, because this will impose a huge fee on the whole of London were it to be introduced.
Can I just ask you, all three of you, is net zero a vote winner on the doorstep?
Yes, it is. Yes, it absolutely is. Certainly in Richmond, obviously we're very lucky in Richmond Park. We've got amazing green spaces and you know, and a river, and people are really, really concerned about the environment, and they are absolutely you know, and more particularly concerned about climate change, and very prepared to, you know, do the things that are needed to do.
Well, look, I mean, it's absolutely critical for our planet, for our future, and people agree with that. It's doing it in the right way, but that's exactly what the government's doing, because we're not just using it to decarbonise, but actually bring down people's bills. In fact, we've seen that news on that just today.
So everyone will say we've got to save the planet, and I remember saying to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister, we need to do this, but the problem you're going to have, unless you explain in words of one syllable to people how much it's going to cost them and what changes they have to make to their lifestyle, then there'll be huge resistance against it.
I'm sure this is a subject we'll come back to again and again, but first, let's talk about fare evasion, because it's costing the tube network £130 million a year. It's a costly problem transport bosses can't ignore.
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? But everyone else has to pay.
Tory MP Robert Jenrick took matters into his own hands and confronted the Dodgers in a viral video. And our own cameras didn't take long to find someone trying to travel without a ticket, which annoyed paying commuters.
Disgusting, absolutely disgusting, you know what I mean? I pay my tax and everything, so people should pay, everyone should pay.
I've got 2 mouths to feed, so why should people get free travel if I can't?
It bothers me that I even see the staff members watching it happen, and no, it feels they do it with impunity.
I can understand it, because I think life is tough, it's very expensive. So I think young people are struggling.
It's unfair, everybody needs to pay. It costs a lot of money to travel, and these people are trying to ride for you free.
Bob, a matter of legitimate public concern or a shameless publicity stunt by Robert Jenrick?
Well, I think what Robert's done, I mean, a very brave thing to do to challenge some of these people, including someone who'd got a knife. Very challenging on the tube to have done it. What it's done is highlight the problem, if nothing else. And one of the interesting things that's happened subsequently to this is you go to any tube station now and you'll see the notices up saying fare evasion is a criminal offence. And therefore, and these are the number of people that are being prosecuted as a result. So it's drawn attention to it, and indeed it's drawn the public's attention to this challenge. We want to see more people using public transport and paying their way.
So look, I mean, obviously, I agree with everyone on the film that fare evasion is completely disgraceful, and it imposes costs on all of us. I do think it's faintly ridiculous, you know, Robert Jenrick's gimmick. He firstly went to a station where there was a big enforcement team already acting. But
not
secondly,
very successful by the look of it.
And secondly, he was part of a government that, again, cut funding for the police and cut funding for TfL. But look, TfL takes this incredibly. TfL takes this incredibly seriously, and that's why we've seen a doubling of investigation staff. We've seen the use of new tech-based solutions to try to deal deal with this. And frankly, it's a bit unfair on TfL, who were doing this long before Robert Jenrick's stunt / leadership bid film. And I think it's been successful. Already over the last year, we've seen fare evasion down by 1/10, and fare evasion levels are now less than 1/3 of comparable cities like New York.
Sarah, I'm not sure whether you'd film it, but would you confront a fare dodger?
I wouldn't know. I think that would be, and I don't think members of the public should as a general rule, because you're potentially putting yourself in harm's way, and that could escalate a situation and, create even more danger for anyone. But I think it's faintly ridiculous for Bob to be saying that, so no one was aware of this issue before Robert Jenrick came along. I think they very much were. I mean, lots of people and the people you were interviewing on your film there, people do see fare dodgers. And I think what would be good for members of the public is to know what to do about it. It would be good to know that there's you can report that on your phone, perhaps just send a text or something like that, and know that that's going to be dealt with, because what you really see is people feel it's really, really unfair. And I think just to maintain that sense, everybody has to pay if they're going to use the tube or the bus, just to see that enforcement and to make sure that it is.
Well, that's one idea from Sarah. What do you think is the answer?
Well, I mean, clearly, all of us are using public transport in London will use Oyster cards or some form of payment going through. Clearly, it's identifiable, and it's identifiable that enforcement actions. Officers can challenge people when they're travelling. One of the biggest problems, by the way, is, for example, football matches in London, where at the end of the line, where you're leaving, basically they've given up. You see loads and loads of people literally walking through without using Oyster cards or any form of payment. And I think there's got to be a problem here that has to be solved. It's not going to be solved by us as politicians, but it's got to be TfL looking down how they can actually deal with this problem, and members of the public reporting it, maybe giving a view on what can be done to prevent. And at the end of the day, it's the attitude of the individuals.
You might think that Robert Jenrick was carrying out a publicity stunt, but it has raised the issue, hasn't it? And people are annoyed by it.
Well, look, I mean, obviously we're talking about it here, so clearly in that sense it's been successful. But and look, I think there's probably quite a degree of unity between us. I think we all agree it's a problem. We all agree it's down to the behaviour of individuals. What I'd also add is that I think there are some people who do this a lot, and making sure there's a focus on those who are doing it the most, and they don't just get tickets. TfL gave out 63,000 fixed penalty notices last year, but that they actually get prosecuted, and 18,000 files were forwarded to the police, I think will be the heart of the matter.
Well, thank you very much for talking to all of us, to us tonight. That's all we've got time for. Thank you to my guests, David Pinto-Dushinsky, Bob Blackman and Sarah Olney. We're back next month. Until then, goodbye and thank you for watching.